through Friday, 12 noon to 1 p.m. I want to mention a bit of a program note, if I may, and that is that since the election of 2020, I've been censored, as have most people who tend to be conservative to the right of center and other variations. And I am just sick and tired of the censorship. I know what censorship is. I'm a veteran radio talk show host in Boston who has been on various stations. So I know what it is to observe FCC regulations. I have never had a problem in the past. I have had controversial opinions. Sometimes I push the envelope a bit, but I never had an issue. So what I surmise from that is that what I'm dealing with now is just political censorship. It's not a violation of community standards, and it's been going on since the election of 2020. And I am just tired of it. It's demoralizing. It's depressing. You know, there are so many people I want to interview that I can't because I'll be stricken off the YouTube channel. I've already been stricken off of TikTok, even though they let me reopen another station, but I lost 35,000 followers. And I've gotten warnings and I've been algorithmed, and I'm not here complaining because this is happening to anyone who doesn't follow the party line. So I just want to mention that as an experiment, I have opened a station at Rumble. And I understand that Rumble does not censor, we'll see, but it's going to live stream on Rumble, the program, Monday through Friday from 12 noon to 1. I probably may or may not simultaneously live stream on YouTube, depending on the topic and depending on the guest. But if I'm not going to be on YouTube, I'll do a quick, short video announcing what the program is and where I'll be. So anyone who's used to watching me on YouTube can go there and see an uncensored program. And I'm calling it Charles Moscowitz Live, Uncensored and Unleashed. And I'm really going to be launching it starting tomorrow at 12 noon. All right, we're joined by Ralph. Now, Ralph, you host a Twitter account called Populi. You are a British politician. You're coming to us from across the pond, as we like to say.
I'm not sure what a politician, but I have a great interest in politics. Yes, I'm actually a technologist. So
you're a technologist.
Yeah, so, for my sins. So.
And so talk a little bit about what the heck is going on right now in Britain. I mean, I don't know a lot about British politics. I know that Prime Minister Boris Johnson led the effort in terms of Brexit, which again, I feel like I don't have a horse in that race, but to my way of thinking, it looks like a positive movement. It looks very much similar to the Trump movement. It is a movement of reassertion of sovereignty and thus of democratic institutions and rights for citizens. And that he really did lead that effort, but now he seems a bit squishy and he's kind of seems to have fallen lockstep into I don't know, some kind of an internationalist line when it comes to things like COVID lockdowns and whatnot. So why don't you start to share some of your thoughts on that, Ralph?
Well, Brexit is a great punctuation point. And you would, if you look at the survey data for the exit polls, the single biggest reason given was sovereignty. By 1 percentage point, it beat immigration. So the British had made the long claim that, hey, don't want to be ruled by someone else. Unfortunately, Boris has just taken the family silver and given it away straight to the globalists. So if the vote was a proxy for immigration, well, his second act in Parliament, after having given the largest mandate, was to raise the upper cap on immigration to be infinite. So Boris Johnson is not really a conservative. I'm sorry?
Doesn't that sort of defeat the purpose? I mean, the Brexit movement, I understand, had basically two principles. The first one actually, frankly, was control of immigration on the part of the United Kingdom, which I would argue is the right of any sovereign nation to decide who comes into the national homeland and who doesn't. That's just why we have nations. It's the same principle as why you or I have the right to decide who comes into our private home. You know,
you would think that one of the core tenets of conservatism would be a good fences make good neighbors, right?
Right.
But that apparently was not the case. See, the Conservative Party has literally is kowtowing to the globalist lines. But I believe there's a deeper reason. And in my background, especially, I've spent the last few years in a deep journey to the alt-right and the dissident right. I noticed with some amusement, I watched a video with Reich commander Richard Spencer, and I did watch the recent one with the lunatic Adam Green. And I look at this, I think there's something much more significant occurring, I think, in global politics, and that is the way us technologists look at it is we have actually a wiring up a single global engine since the 1990s. And that global engine is taking power away from the nations upwards. It is removing national sovereignty. It is diluting. It is making all the organizations, the institutions, multinational, transnational, and international. It is striking through sovereignty, vertically, horizontally. And there are only two types of politicians left in my mind, those who are for this globalized, homogenized world and those who are against it. So traditional conservatism would have been seen as the ideological battle between the left and right. I believe is now an ideological battle between the North and the South, literally between power towards the people by devolution and power away from sovereignty into the hands of the global elites who wish to see a single world order, I don't mean this in a conspiratorial sense. I'm a computer scientist by craft. I despise conspiracy theorists, hence my mocking of that Adam Green character. But they have these very, very well-controlled, well-orchestrated plans, looking at a planning horizon 30, 50 years with a single dissolved national boundaries, global holomic culture. You can get a Starbucks or McDonald's anywhere. Nevada is the same as Nebraska, is the same as Namibia, right? They want to see Namibia equal to Nevada. And I think that's where I believe the future of our political, for at least the next decade or so, will be where our trajectories lie, right? I think the left-right culture war, I can appreciate it. I think the left have won the culture war to a large degree. They've almost saturated themselves too. I mean, other than sexual relations with animals and children, they've almost exhausted that long march, right? And conservatives, I think, have an opportunity to unite with more centrists and leftists against this force. That's my kind of like summary.
No, it's a tremendous. And by the way, just as a little sidebar, I think that pedophilia is on its way.
It absolutely is. Yeah.
And I think that I predict within the next 3 to 5 years, it is going to be normalized. It's going to be done in a way that it's no longer viewed as a perversion, but as an orientation, quote unquote. And if something once something is classified to be an orientation, the implication is that there's nothing you can do about it, and therefore to be against it is to be a bigot, to be prejudiced. And what I say to that is, even if it is an orientation, it doesn't mean it's a good orientation. You could have an orientation to murder someone. It doesn't make it right. The point. All right. So I think that your analysis is really spot on in terms of looking at this world order movement. I mean, I'm not a conspiratorial thinker per se, and I've debunked a lot of conspiracies, but it's a matter of kind of standard history. And this is including the writings of none other than Winston Churchill, who's written about the fact that the world order movement started with the French Revolution and Adam Weishaupt. Now, I don't want to go too far back, but let's just say that the world order movement we're dealing with now, which is to abolish sovereignty in the de facto sense, while leaving the appearance of sovereignty in place, abolish religion in the de facto sense, while leaving the religious ritual and the kind of the visuals in place. That's something that is taking on a lot of traction now, with the result of the sort of the Great Reset movement of Klaus Schwab. I don't know how far deeply I want to go to this with YouTube here, but it has a lot to do with what's called transhumanism, and I have a chapter on this in my new book, which is coming out actually next week. In that the idea of transforming mankind literally, biologically, into a new species using electronic components embedded and using satellite to track.
Yeah, this is exactly my narrative as well. I believe even things like lockdown and the Great Reset, myself and others working together on things have been tracking this quite closely. They needed an excuse for biological identification, which must come before biological integration. So before we had the identities electronically, and everyone had Charles's electronic ID, but it didn't have his DNA. Once I have his DNA, I can prepare my iWatch 17 that can sense your skin and your cells and deliver tailored products and services. But to your first point, which is more important to the Enlightenment and forward to Churchill, absolutely. I think it has been a stripping of the sacred that occurred starting the Enlightenment. Once we codified in the 30 Years' War, we codified the rights of man. We get the English, French, American revolutions following very quickly after the 30-year war. We get the idea that, we can live where blood and soil and spirit has been decapitated, in that the spirit is just a bolt on. Your traditions, I can assume you're of the Jewish tradition, your traditions will be subservient to the rights of man. You'll be a bolt on that you participate. You wouldn't put God first. And as soon as you didn't put God first, it wasn't very quick before the house came tumbling down. And now, your abortion legislation, persecution for churches in the US, the gay baker of the cake, these things all showed you very quickly that Enlightenment project weakened, I believe, the conservative West very, very deeply and very structurally. I believe before those nations of faith of any of the Abrahamic traditions definitely would have been the ones that were. And even again, I'll hop back to the old Alan Green because I just finished watching it. You can see that as a case in point. Here's a man completely despiritualized who believes there's a long plot since the first temple that the Jews are running the world. I mean, you look at this, you think only that completely hollow thinking in that sort of line would have made such a man devoid of any sense of the spirit, that he actually looks and hunts for conspiracy theories that no rational actor would actually, I noticed David was on his case too, but no rational actor would think that way. But that's a deeper malaise. You see it in the ordinary, you see it in the banal, Charles. You see where people don't stand up anymore for Lady of the Boss. They no longer look out for the elderly woman with her shopping bag. Even though there are traditional values, they've just been lost. And I think conservatism must start there. You must come back there. We must come back and start saying we must reestablish the sacred where it has been lost. And from that, we can then begin the process of conservation in the broader sense.
Indeed.
So that's my view of that. Yeah.
I'm going to save a deeper talk about the transhumanism for my Rumble channel with you. So I'll have you back for that because, again, this is YouTube and we have to be careful. I think that's one of these no-nos. You can't, there are certain hot, third rails.
Certain words cannot be said.
And if you touch the third rail, on YouTube, so I don't want to go there. But, your analysis is really quite good in looking at the spiritual side of it. This idea that part of this world order is the one world religion, which is basically atheistic and which essentially enthrones a very select elite group of people who will have access to things like transhumanism, frankly, in that they think it's going to give them eternal life and they'll become a new species that can then decide over the rest of us. And that, they're using electronic means to get to that. But, it goes to this one figure that I actually cover in one of my more recent books, in the modern sense, Julian Huxley, who was the first head of UNESCO, which was established as part of the United Nations right after World War II. His grandfather, H.G. Huxley, was known as Darwin's bulldog. He was the main promoter of the Darwin's book, Origin of Species. In 1859, Darwin was sort of the British elite of the day. And of course, at that time, Great Britain was really the ruler of much of the world. I mean, it was an international empire. And that, what it did was it dethroned the creator of the universe, the one God, and basically turned man into an evolving animal, that we all are just sort of a bag of bones, and our purpose is to procreate superior members through what Darwin called natural selection, what we call breeding. And that this way they would eventually would pop a new species, a superior species. And, or Darwin used the word race, frankly, to describe this. And his close cousin, Francis Galton, who was the originator of the idea of eugenics, he started the idea of doing surveys. He contributed a lot, actually, a lot of good things to science, but he believed that the process of natural selection had to be speeded up scientifically. And that makes sense if you understand the science, alleged, the quote unquote science. by breeding and by removing or by reducing unwanted or what he called dysgenic races. This was carried on, of course, by Margaret Sanger with her Negro Project. But the point I'm making is that Julian Huxley was his grandson. His other grandson, Aldous Huxley, was the author of Brave New World, which kind of blew the whistle on a lot of this. You know, he was saying toward the end of his life that the entire planet would become a pharmacological concentration camp. We would all be on some kind of a controlled substance, and that those controlled substances would alter our consciousness. It would make us docile. It would create, kind of a willing, kind of a chemically induced collective all over the world. And he, of course, he committed suicide using video cameras and by taking an overdose of LSD. And, he wanted it to be filmed for the whole world to see. The only reason why the world didn't see it was because it happened to coincide with the day that John F. Kennedy was assassinated. So, I mean, it didn't go.
But it's interesting you say that, Charles, because it's actually that, and it's even worse if you look at the obvious consequentialism of the origin of species. Is, of course, it was the most important thinker that influenced Nietzsche. So Nietzsche pretty much throws out everything in the Western canon when he realizes what Darwin says. And then you get the long-term effect of that is Nazism, right? Sure. So Nietzsche literally says, we give up truth, we give up God, and communism, we give up truth, we give up God, we give up everything, we go into the blonde pea spray in the jungle, absolutely savagery, and with it, morality. So you can see, that there's a philosophical strain that lends itself to both extremes, communism and Nazism. And then there is the almost cold, chrome-like feeling of the machine that feels nothing, that says, as long as this gene is superior and we can replicate ourselves, who cares about male bonds, males and females forming nuclear families and looking after their offspring? The offspring could be shunted into the state and eventually to a factory and eventually into a battery farm, because after all, it's just a provider of energy. And that vision, that I know you want to keep that for the transhuman vision, that is well within our reach. The last Google and MIT estimates are 2042 or 2043 for the singularity. So we're literally two decades away.
No, it's happening a lot faster than we could have thought. I mean, and going back to Julian Huxley, the founder of UNESCO, he was a eugenist who decided to tidy up eugenics after the war because World War II gave it a bad image. It gave it a stench, given what happened with the Jews in the Nazi Holocaust. So he developed what he called an international, I don't know what he called it, but kind of an evolutionary religion. And he talks about this in the guidebook and the founding booklet for UNESCO, where this evolutionary religion, which basically would worship evolution as its most basic principle, would replace all of the world's religions, Christianity, Judaism, Hinduism, Buddhism, all of it, while leaving in place the trappings. You'd continue to go to your church, you'd continue to have Easter, you'd continue to go to Mass, you'd continue to have Yom Kippur, all of the things you do, and the marriage rituals, but the actual belief system, the philosophy, the actual what people understand to be true would become this evolutionary humanism. And I think that we can say that he was quite a prophet because his view has been largely successful. There have been some churches that have stood up against it, some synagogues. Certainly the Roman Catholic Church has stood up against it, I think, until maybe recently with this particular Pope, who I think has strayed from the Catholic mission, unfortunately. And I mean, a mission that even though I'm not Catholic, I support. And that we see this kind of merge into this kind of now somewhat open one world religion. Now, I don't know how far I could go on this one on YouTube.
I think you're actually right, but it's not quite a straight progress because, again, I'm obsessed with measuring everything like Galileo. And if you plot the data against the Hindus, with 1.5 billion people have been immune to it, pretty much because of the nature of their faith. If you leave China for a second, the Eastern churches, Russia, Poland, Hungary, where I've attended and worship in churches in Eastern Europe, for example, they've maintained the faith. Western Europe has fallen. Western Europe has fallen,
It has.
and more importantly, the Jewish people seem to also be under attack. And I'm not sure what the data is, but I think there's an increasing percentage of progressive secular Jews,
You're
right, who
right.
literally are not following Hashem anymore. They're just sort of, perhaps they're being ritualistic Jews, but they're not actually, they no longer believe.
No, they're no longer
And
believers.
yeah,
Maybe
and
that's
this
why
is horrid, right? So,
maybe that's why my good friend Jay Dyer has become an Eastern Orthodox believer. I mean, and some others. It's still somewhat of a preserve of belief. And I don't know how far I want to go with talking about what's happened to Judaism, because this is YouTube. I'll save it for Rumble, other than to say that I don't think that the Anti-Defamation League represents Jewish faith anymore, not that they ever did. I mean, they are pro-Israel, and I'm very happy they are, but they tend to be they
represent progressivism, right?
whatever's socialistic, whatever's on the left, including unlimited abortion rights right up to the point of birth and beyond, gay marriage, whatever it is, they're for it. And anybody that's against it, it's an anti-Semite. That's just
a hater.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I noticed that as well with the ADL, and I mean,
and they have nothing to do with Judaism. These things,
nothing at all. I had my first strike.
They're socialist.
Absolutely, I had my first strike recently in YouTube. Though I was censored in the early days, so I'm stuck at 3.5 or 3.7 subs or something, 1,000 subs. But because I was labeled a white supremacist, of course, clearly a white supremacist, right?
Oh,
and
sure.
I noticed I got my first strike recently, even though we had a bunch of panels where David was on, and we were debunking anti-Semitic arguments. And even then, the algorithm has still decided, even though it was all about debunking anti-Semitic arguments, has decided to be struck for hate speech.
Well, I mean,
David and I is in charge, right?
Oh yeah, I mean, I got a strike for having David on my show, and we're two fairly devout Jews, and we were talking about Judaism, and we got and I was stricken off YouTube for this. So
that's the algorithm. It's nothing to do with there's no people involved anymore in Google. It's
something, I don't know what it is, and it's an interesting subject. It's something I want to delve into once I'm on a less censored network, which I am now, and I'm going to start to do it. But I think that it might be, and my TikTok station was just taken down. I think that it's an issue of algorithm, where you have a small council of leftists who run these things, who punch in certain words that, if they appear, you lose your station, or you get put behind the 8 ball, or you have people themselves monitoring and complaining.
It doesn't work. I can tell you how it works, Charles.
I'll
tell you how it works if you like, Charles, because I actually know I've mates at Google.
Yeah.
It doesn't. The volume of traffic is just too high for them to ever have that kind of stuff. It's a software algorithm running, which does things like detects word patterns, detects counts of words, detects frequency of words and tone of words. And then they have enough words of a certain shape. Machine learning decides that those ones will successfully not appeal. The humans only come in when someone calls up. So someone called up an enemy of Charles, maybe someone sitting in Inman Square, somewhere goes, I just don't like anything Charles says, and I'll just call up Google every time, right? I'm just creating, those are the override scenarios.
I understand.
And that's when the human team.
And I think that, by the way,
I
think that it also is bigger than just the big tech internet, which they are trying to control, and which they have largely come to control. I think it also includes books. I mean, like, for example, I publish my books on Amazon, which of course is the big part of this big tech, and they do a great job of helping me publish my books.
I assume they don't pay you, right?
No, they do. They actually pay pretty well. I mean, you can get 7% royalties.
Okay.
But recently I've published a few books that have had 0 sales, 0, not even 1.
Wow.
And I know that I do better than that. And it just makes me wonder if there might not be, and this book particular, dealt with a real taboo subject, which was what happened during the 2020 election. We're not allowed to talk about that. And for YouTube censors, I'm just saying, I'm not getting into it right now. I'm saving that one for Rumble. And when I go on Rumble, I'm going to go into that big time. But right now,
you're going to let it rip.
Oh yeah. And by the way, Ralph, you're a computer analyst and a computer expert. Am I going to be okay on Rumble, do you think? I mean, do you think I'll be able to?
If I were to invest in the new platform, I wouldn't pick Rumble myself. I would invest in Odyssey.
In which one?
It's called Odyssey. and that's where everyone.
Oh, Odyssey, sure.
Yeah,
Okay.
because you're gonna get much more traction there. Far less people will watch Rumble than they will, and Odyssey is based on the blockchain, so it's very difficult for them to
Right.
implement things without Odyssey.
Can I go live stream on Odyssey? Because I have an Odyssey
Absolutely
account.
everything. Yeah, absolutely everything. If you're just starting off, don't waste your time on Rumble. Strong recommendation. Go to Odyssey.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll do it
That's where all
all.
the
I mean,
distance.
I'll run it
Yeah.
on all of them through Restream. And also, I mean, do you know anything about Ben Swan's new Sovereign network?
No, I haven't. There are lots of these popping up, and I think lots of these alt techs are not going to make it in the ecosystem. So one big differentiation is going to be, are they blockchain based or not? Odyssey looks like it's probably going to be the winner, including DLive. And obviously, you can use Restream to stream anywhere, but you're going to have to build up a core audience in one of them. I think Odyssey would be
Odyssey is the one. Well, I'm going to try to.
Basically, alt-right over there, and they're saying all sorts of things on Odyssey.
Okay.
So
I'll try to link to Odyssey through Restream. But you know, I mean, I'm not deep pockets here. I don't have. This is, as my wife,
free.
You know, as my wife says, this is my hobby. So I don't have a lot of budget to deal with, and I wouldn't mind actually figuring out a way to turn it into at least somewhat of a monetized thing.
Odyssey monetizes you automatically because it's blockchain based. Yeah, so you get paid immediately from your first videos, and it's not like YouTube at all. So I would really look into it. Check out everyone on the Odyssey. It's probably the platform worth putting on. But one thing to draw you back on a previous point, though, is you're right, but it's not strictly true that they don't have a religion. They have a religion, and their religion is based on, if you look at its parallel, scientism, and the scientific method is their true mantra. Type 1, type 2 errors are the devil and their litany. And the priesthoods are these new atheists, these skeptics, these Richard Dawkins types who are revered and worshipped. They're canonized in this materialism, right? If you look around, I was again referring to the Adam Green debate, even when he quoted Richard Dawkins, extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. And the way he did it was almost like paying homage to a priest. He was listening to a rabbi, and you watch it going, your behavior is techno-feudalistic religion, but you have no God. It's really it's a materialistic religion, right? It's quite.
It's what you believe in. Only that which you can see and tactile know is true, and there's nothing greater in the universe, and there's no supernatural side of the universe. Everything can be explained by absolute provable science, which, by the way, is somewhat of a contradiction for them, because the theory of evolution is not proven. It's not, there's no evidence of it. Even Darwin himself admitted that when he said that the sight of a peacock feather made him sick in his diary. He said because of the hundreds of thousands of intricate levels of shape and color and size and perfectly aligned elements, how could this have just happened out of random evolution? How could, I mean, he said all life somehow magically sprang out of what he called a warm little pond. You know, it's like, if you think about the science of it, it doesn't really make sense. So in a way,
you should come back to that, Charles. I say it doesn't really matter if you take evolution, because I'm a big fan of all that those kind of topics. But it wouldn't really matter when God decides to intervene in the supernatural. He overrides the law of physics at his whim.
Of course, because it's the whole idea, and I get into this in my book, God is God, that God created the universe and thus separated himself from the universe by doing the creation, and the universe is different than God. That's the basic foundation of Western belief. It's a little different from Eastern belief, which I respect as well, but which they believe everything is just infinite. There was no beginning, there will be no end. And that this idea that there is a supernatural element, it's interesting we're talking about this. The formula that I use in my book, God is God, to prove God, is a mathematical formula. And it is the principle of the zero. The zero is a symbol that means nothing. Right? And anything over or under zero is something, even if it's a negative thing. -1 is less than 0. So therefore, it can be translated into a thing. The only thing that is not a thing is 0. And you cannot create a thing out of zero. Zero plus anything is still zero. You cannot, zero becomes, it's inviolable. It doesn't change.
The absence of a thing, yeah.
Right? Nothing is nothing. Something is something. And you can't create something out of nothing. I think Billy Preston, something from something, nothing from something from something means nothing, or whatever you say, in the song.
Yeah.
The point I'm making.
That's even a modern version of the Kalam argument. But I think even I look at the opposite thing, and I usually have tongue-in-cheek things because I tend to argue with atheists and stuff a lot. I'm like, look, so if you're just material, right, and you're just a piece of flesh unfolding your 20,000 genes, I want a strong moral argument that I shouldn't eat you. Give me a very good reason why I shouldn't eat you, because you can't, because you're just flesh. You're just going to decompose anyway, and you look particularly delicious, right? So please mount a strong moral case against cannibalism, and usually it's the same old argument.
Right. They won't acknowledge that those sorts of laws of nature had an extra element to them, and it's called reason. And they evolved in human consciousness. They exist in nature. There's an abstract side of existence. But the process of growth and of genuine change is our ability to become aware of the nature of these things. So if you have something, you can't get something out of nothing. Therefore, there had to have been an event that created something out of nothing. And there's no scientific explanation for this, no mathematical possibility of it. And I would argue that something was God. Yeah. That there had to have been a supernatural event by which something happened that created a thing out of a no thing. And that thing is God, because it can't exist in nature. It can't exist in logic or in science. Science is science. It's the study of God's universe, but you cannot create something out of nothing. So that, to me, I mean, in my own simplistic way, is
I look at it completely differently, Charles. I mean, because I've been it's quite a sort of a scientific kind of kid, if you like, very, very young in my age. And I look around and go, look, every time science has had an ontology, the atomists, the Greeks, alchemists, Newtonians, every time in history, we believe we were right. And then we're happy to throw it all out when the next one came along, Newtonian mechanics. But then I look back and I go, but do you really need me to accept that science is saying, when I look at the universe of 15 billion years and the stars I can't even see, that some guys with a piece of equations is telling me the best way to understand the universe is by measuring it? Not at all. I believe we are looking at general revelation of God everywhere we look. Everything I see is the general revelation of the metaphysical first. And then physics is just like my spanner or my wrench to just look at the car, right? But the beauty and the wonder of God has got nothing to do at all with, my what should I call it, my ontology du jour, what I believe science is telling me this year, because there'll be something else next year. They say, sorry, Einstein, you're a very clever chap, and he was completely wrong. Newton, same as that. And on we go, right? So I don't even accept their argumentation lines. I think it's just nonsense.
No, I mean, you're talking about, physics and math. I mean, these are means by which we measure existence, right? And we categorize it in a way that it could be organized and that we can understand it and then employ it to improve our lives and our societies. We can develop architecture and all these other things that require such measurements and a means and a method and a code of developing such measurements. And that, of course, translates into computers. And it's all part of measuring units of existence, and also in the abstract sense, units of time. This is just part of, this whole thing is based upon an identification of truth. And, I'm studying sociology. My new book, which is coming out, is going to be called Sociology for Conservatives. And one of the, which is unusual because sociology is very left. In fact, it was created by the left and it's been a tool of the left. But there is one major sociologist, Emil Durkheim, who developed the concept of functionalism, where he would look at institutions in the broad definition of the term and try to improve them by reform, by finding ways to balance them so you could get to corruption that's natural to all of us as individuals and as institutions. And if an institution proves to be unworkable to the advancement of humanity, you abolish it. Like, for example, slavery. It was abolished because, we eventually came to realize that it is immoral for one person to own another person, like you'd own a piece of property, like you'd own a hubcap. You can't, it's not moral. That's something that came out of belief and out of an abstract understanding, not out of, any kind of like hard science.
No.
And
that's why, like,
so
David has these great shows on consciousness, and he claims that it's part of his Judeo responsibilities to understand the universe and understand consciousness. It's part of his tradition. You look at ultimately, that is the ultimate search, is it? It's our experience within what cannot be just material, right? I don't, if I look at my partner and I have an affectionate glance, it's not a chemical reaction in my brain that's occurring. Please don't tell me it's some reaction in my brain that caused that look. It's something much deeper. Same with my child. I don't think that affection for my child is a consensual chemical reaction. That's absurd. It's an act of love. Right. And love is not described as a chemical reaction. So I think this is going to be the physical boundary, especially in this transhuman trajectory, is going to be where I think we're going to run a high-speed train into a series of brick walls where we're going to be testing what is foundationally what it means to be human. Because I think the more they try to make us a battery and the more we resist, the more we're going to start realizing, well, what is the thing that I'm preserving and protecting? It can't just be my limbs, because you're giving me some way to improve my limb. Like we're the same generation, the $6 billion man or something, right? You're going to make me also the steel man or something like that. But I'm still going to want to feel that my arm is more than just an appendage, right? It is something deeper. And I think
there's a greater meaning.
Yeah, I think that's going to be a greater. I can't wait for the first waves of resistance. That's all I can say.
It's already well underway, and I think that I'm very optimistic about the eventual success of this idea that the individual is sovereign under God. That's an American idea. That's what I'm going to get. That is the American philosophy and political idea. That's what made America unique and exceptional in the world, not because we're better than anyone else, but because we embraced an idea that's true and that's available to all people in the context of their own cultures and their own sovereignties, which I support. Anyway, Ralph, we could talk a lot. You and I could go on for hours. This is great.
Yeah,
this is really, really good. And I'm really glad to meet you. And I hope to have you on regularly on my Uncensored and Unleashed.
I would love to come. I would love to shoot the breeze on your Odyssey platform where we can speak more freely.
I'm going to get into Odyssey and Rumble. Rumble is going to be still there, but and I'm developing that. I'm really going to have that up and running very soon. So I'll have you back for that. And Ralph, let my listeners and viewers know where they can reach you and how they can check out your work and your videos.
Channel, I'll leave it a link in the description. It's called the House of Comments. That's where I just rebranded from Right Reaction to House of Comments. And that's my YouTube channel. We have regular streams. Usually they're fairly provocative and some of them are more serious. And that's where you'll find me for the fun stuff. So.
Excellent. All right, Ralph, Populi is the name of the site, right?
No, that's something else. We'll talk about that separately.
Oh, okay. Sorry. How can people? You'll put it up, but is there like?
I'll put links in the description together.
Great. So. All right, Ralph. Listen, I want to thank you for joining me. It's been a pleasure. It's been an honor. Thank you very much.
Good evening, Charles. Take care.